Okay, good afternoon. I am Panagiotis Roilos, the George Seferis Professor of Modern Greek Studies and Professor of Comparative Literature here at Harvard, a faculty associate of the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, where I chair the Seminar on Cultural Politics and the director of the Delphi Academy of European Studies. I would like to welcome you at this emblematic event and to thank you for joining us this afternoon at this extremely busy time of the year, despite Mother Nature's challenging behavior. After all, challenges are almost natural to us. This year marks the 200th anniversary of the beginning of the Greek Revolution against the Ottoman Turks, a revolution that resulted in the foundation of the Greek state. However, the establishment of the Greek state does not coincide with the beginnings of the formation of modern Hellenism. These beginnings go back already to the late 15th century. In the 3 centuries between the fall of the Byzantine Empire and the Greek Enlightenment of the late 18th century, there was almost no decade in which Greeks, many scholars of the diaspora, but also in the Ottoman Empire, would not appeal to influential figures of European political and cultural life to help them liberate themselves from the Ottoman Turks. The Greek Revolution of 1821 was a historical political event of enormous importance, not only for the particular region of southeastern Europe where it took place, but for European political history as a whole. It was a huge blow to the conservative, reactionary politics of the coalition of major monarchist European powers, the so-called Holy Alliance. It was a rather unholy one. It marked the beginning of the gradual decline of the Ottoman Empire. In other words, it initiated or accelerated dramatic geopolitical developments in that part of the world, and especially through its early official constitutional declarations and thanks to the main proponents of its ideological political justification, it aligned itself with the 2 most important progressive political events of the late 18th century, the American and the French Revolutions. Any kind of anniversary tends to activate, I maintain, a ritually inflected experiencing of time. It marks a break in the normal flow of time. As a rule, an anniversary entails a dynamic, dialectical intercrossing of temporal orders. The past filters through to the present, and through its transformative revisiting by the latter, it shapes aspects of the present's imaginary pre-enactment of the future. An anniversary is an occasion, kairos, to use an Aristotelian concept, for re-examining the past and pondering present and emerging future opportunities and challenges. In the first 2 centuries of its history, the Greek state has accomplished extraordinary achievements in many domains: geopolitical, political, cultural, social. It has at least tripled its territory. It has become an active member of major international alliances and unions, most notably of the EU. It has become the country of major representatives of world culture. Let me mention here just a few names: George Seferis, Nobel Prize for Literature, 1963, Nikos Kazantzakis, Odysseas Elitis, Nobel Prize for Literature, 1979, Yannis Ritsos, Lenin Prize, 1977, Maria Callas, Agni Baltsa, Manos Hatzidakis, Mikis Theodorakis, Yannis Xenakis, Jules Dassin, Theodore Angelopoulos, Yorgos Lanthimos, and many others. Today, Greece faces serious socioeconomic and geopolitical challenges, especially in its eastern boundaries. Some of these challenges may attest to a number of omissions or mistakes on the part of some of its leaders and of its allies. At the same time, many new opportunities in a number of areas present themselves to Greece, almost 200 years after its establishment as an independent state. The George Seferis Chair of Modern Greek Studies commemorates this extraordinary landmark of global history with a series of events that take place throughout the calendar year. Let me mention first the series Reconsidering the Greek Revolution at the Seminar on Modern Greek Studies at the Mahindra Humanities Center. Scholars from different fields and different countries are invited to contribute their insights on diverse aspects of the Greek Revolution and its impact on the formation of contemporary Greek and broader European politics, culture, and society. A selection of these presentations will be published in an edited volume. Almost 2 months ago, a major two-day international conference entitled New Perspectives on the Greek Revolution took place. The conference was co-organized by the George Seferis Chair of Modern Greek Studies and the Karamanlis Chair in Hellenic and European Studies at the Fletcher School of Tufts University. The proceedings of the conference will also be published in a book. All these events culminate in our celebratory meeting this afternoon here at this very hospitable and august center, the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, and of course in the keynote speech of Ambassador Gianna Angelopoulos Daskalakis, the president of the Committee Greece 2021. About Mrs. Angelopoulos Daskalakis' multifaceted contributions to political and cultural life in Greece, in the rest of Europe, but also in the US, I'll say more things later today. For now, let me share with you that I'm very happy that she has wholeheartedly accepted my invitation to speak here at Harvard on the occasion of the 200th anniversary of the Greek Revolution. Thank you, Gianna. The event this afternoon has been possible thanks to the help of many people, especially of my research assistant and brilliant PhD candidate, Ilan Friedman, of Dr. Kalliopi Dourou, the preceptor in Modern Greek, Teresa Vu, Sarah Banze of the Weatherhead Center, my dear colleague and former director of the Weatherhead Center, Professor Michel Lamont, Ted Gilman, the executive director of the center, Ambassador Dimitrios Giras, and the Consul General of Greece in Boston, Mr. Stratos Efthymiou. To the latter, special thanks are owed for his support and productive collaboration. I would like to thank also the Consuls General of France, Great Britain, Haiti, and Portugal for their participation in this celebration today. Thank you. Especially and deeply grateful I am to my dear colleague, Professor Melani Cammett. When I first suggested to Melani that we co-sponsor an event to commemorate the bicentennial of the Greek War of Independence, she immediately and enthusiastically embraced the idea. Our gathering here this evening would not have been possible without her generous support. Without further ado, I would like to yield the floor to my colleague Melani Cammett, the Clarence Dillon Professor of International Affairs and Professor at the Department of Global Health and Population and the Director of the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. Melani.
Thank you so much, Panagiotis. It's really a pleasure to be here. As Panagiotis said, I'm the director of the Weatherhead Center, and it's exciting to host an event in person. I think this might actually be the first event we're hosting in person, simultaneously live streamed as well, but it's really wonderful to have you all here. And I want to also especially thank Ambassador Gianna Angelopoulos Daskalakis for joining us here from Greece to help us commemorate this important event, this historic event. It's really a pleasure to host you in Cambridge, and thanks for adding us to your itinerary. I'm also quite grateful for the Consuls General for coming here and helping us to celebrate this important event. So let me just say a few words about the Weatherhead Center and why we wanted to support this event, commemorating the Greek War of Independence. For those of you that don't know, the Weatherhead Center is one of the largest centers at Harvard. I believe it might be the largest center that deals with international affairs. And we have about 230 faculty affiliates from 11 of Harvard's 14 schools that are affiliated with the Weatherhead Center. And we provide extensive support for research by faculty, by graduate students, by undergraduate students on questions related to international affairs. We also support over 30 seminars and workshops and feature special events on topics of global importance, such as the one that we're celebrating here today. Clearly, as Panagiotis has outlined for us, the Greek War of Independence against the Ottoman Empire, an event that unfolded over the course of, I think, about 8 years, was not only an event that was important for the formation of modern Greece, but also an event of great regional and global significance. As we know, the war led to a restructuring of the European order and involved the intervention of major powers in the world. And it also became a symbol of democracy and freedom, which happens to be a major focus of research in our center among many of our scholars. And the Greek revolutionaries drew inspiration from other revolutions, notably the American and French revolutions that predated the Greek Revolution. And we see intellectual and ideological linkages across time periods and contexts in the diffusion of uprisings continuing to this day, of course. More recently in the Arab uprisings, of course, in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. And that is also something of great interest to many of our scholars here at the Weatherhead Center. The case of the Greek Revolution also invites conversations about the decline of empires, about the quest for sovereignty, about nationalism, themes that animate many of the seminars that we support and issues that we address here at the center. And of course, the events of the Greek War of Independence have echoed in modern international relations and have helped to establish a set of linkages regionally and globally that have endured through time. And we've seen this play out in the friendship between Greece, the United Kingdom, other countries, and the United States that helped to shape global politics during World War II and beyond. So really quite an important event of global significance. So for these reasons and more, it seems quite appropriate for us to celebrate the Greek Revolution here at the Weatherhead Center. So I want to now turn to introducing the Consul General of Greece, Stratos Efthymiou, who I know is well known to many of you. He was also a member of the Weatherhead Scholars Program several years ago, and we continue to have an active relationship with him as an alum of that program. And let me say, as I know many of you know, he is a real mover and shaker. His background is quite impressive as well. He's a career diplomat with the Hellenic Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he has served the Greek government in so many capacities that I cannot list them here. We will be here for a very long time. But I also want to point out that he's done all of this while being incredibly young. So really quite impressive, the amount of important posts he's held. He holds a master's degrees from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts and from Sciences Po in France. And he's a graduate of politics and international relations, and speaks 6 languages apart from Greek. Since 2017, he served as the Consul General of Greece in Boston, and during this time in our city, he has been extremely active promoting science, innovation, diplomacy, especially through the Hellenic Innovation Network. Under his leadership, the consulate has been a real buzz of activity, and somehow he's managed to keep this going during the pandemic as well. So we are eternally grateful for the work that he has done in Boston and at Harvard, and grateful for his partnership with the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought that only Greeks exaggerate. So, dear President of the Greece 2021 Committee, Ambassador Angelopoulos, Ambassador Giras, dear colleagues, Consul Generals of the UK, of Haiti, of Portugal, of France, director of the Weatherhead Center, Professor Cammett, George Seferis, Professor Panagiotis, Roilos. Dear friends, thank you all for joining us this evening. It is so lovely to be back to the Weatherhead Center, and I would like to thank the center's director and executive director, Melani, Cammett, and Gilman, for their support and hospitality. And I'm very grateful to Professor Panagiotis Roilos for his support and for conceiving this event, and for inviting Ambassador Daskalaki to be here as the keynote speaker. Ambassador Angelopoulos Daskalaki is a great promoter of Greece and of our cultural heritage, and I think that she is the ideal speaker for today's event. It is our honor to have you here, Ambassador. So with this special event, we came to celebrate at Harvard in probably the best context in the Greek-US relations, the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution, that led to the restoration of democracy in its cradle and to the foundation of an independent Greek kingdom in 1830. I'm personally grateful to my good colleagues here in Boston, the Consul Generals of Haiti, Portugal, the UK, and France, who interrupted a long weekend to come here to pay tribute to Greece. And I think this is a gesture that says a lot about the great nations they represent. Thank you very much, and please let's give them a round of applause. Dear friends, the Greek Revolution, as Professor Cammett so eloquently described, had a significant international dimension, raising, among others, issues of self-determination, of diplomatic recognition, humanitarian intervention, and accelerating the emergence of nation-states and the making of modern Europe, to use the title that historian Mark Mazauer is using for his latest book. The revolution became a mobilizing theme that awoke public opinion, creating Philhellenic movements in France, Great Britain, Russia, in Italy, and of course here in the United States. I want to use my time to highlight a local story and pay tribute to a great personality of 19th century's Boston, the physician Samuel Gridley Howe, who is depicted here on the left in the uniform of a Greek soldier from the time of the Revolution. This is a portrait made by his son-in-law, John Eliot. Samuel Gridley Howe graduated from Brown University and the medical school at Harvard. He could have followed a very successful career as a physician right away, but he put his medical dreams on hold when he decided to come to Greece and fight for the independence of the Greeks. Howe's efforts were limitless. He served as a battlefield surgeon, soldier, fundraiser, publicist, and engineer. He was one of the so many Bostonian Philhellenes who were sympathetic to the Greek cause, like Edward Everett, Daniel Webster, Thomas Winthrop. But Samuel Gridley Howe's impact was probably the biggest. He organized the medical staff of the Greek army during the revolution. He set up refugee camps, and he traveled back and forth between Greece and the United States to establish committees that sent humanitarian aid to Greece. The United States at the time observed a strict neutrality, but he managed to, through his personal intervention, to convince the United States Navy to intervene and protect the humanitarian aid that was coming from the United States to Greece. And that was done by the frigate USS Constitution, which is docked here in Boston and which was sailing at the Aegean in the 1820s. Following these extraordinary actions, Howe was given the title the Lafayette of the Greek Revolution, and he received a decoration from Greece. You can see the photo on the right, It was taken yesterday when Ambassador Angelopoulos paid tribute to Samuel Gridley Howe. You can see the medal on the white ribbon at the right part of the image. This is a tombstone that we restored this year when we paid tribute to Samuel Gridley Howe. What is interesting, but this is the subject of another lecture, is how fighting for the Greek freedom transformed Samuel Gridley Howe personally and made him an abolitionist, striving for the abolition of slavery in his own country. Another thing that he's most known for is the foundation of the Perkins School for the Blind. He was an educator, a physician, and he wanted to empower young people with disabilities. And so he founded the Perkins School for the Blind, which his son-in-law, Michael Anagnos, directed for 30 years following Samuel Gridley Howe's death. So the second picture depicts a stamp at the initiative of the 2021 committee. The Greek Post issued a series of stamps commemorating this great anniversary. The Director General of Greek Post is a Greek from Boston, so we managed to lobby quite successfully to have Samuel Gridley Howe in a stamp. The third picture is Samuel Gridley Howe's house at Mount Vernon 32 on Beacon Hill. This house has been bought and was restored by the Robert McCain family that donated photos at the Consulate General of Greece in Boston. I would like to thank you very much for your kind attention, and I would like to invite my good colleague Arnaud Mentré, the Consul General of France and the Fellow at the Weatherhead Center. France played a crucial role in all the diplomatic and military developments that led to the Greek independence. Delacroix, Chateaubriand are some of the names of French philhellenes who played a very significant role in the Greek Revolution. Monsieur le Consul Général, bienvenue, merci pour votre présence ici.
Dear Stratos, thank you so much. And let me echo what Professor Cammett said about how successful you've been in your mission here in Boston. It's a pleasure to work with you. We have a group of EU Consuls General extremely active, and it's always a privilege to be with you. Dear Professor Cammett and all the community of the Weatherhead Center, Madame l'Ambassadrice, chers collègues consuls généraux, dear friends, this year we commemorate 200 years of the Greek Revolution, 200 years of the birth of modern Greece, 200 years of a certain idea of Europe. The Greek desire for freedom has been and remains a reference, an anchor point, a light for Europe. This idea that we Europeans have today of ourselves, of our continent, of what we expect from Europe, of our common solidarity, this idea also comes to us from the struggles of 1821. The Greek War of Independence was bloody and terrible. It challenged the European consciences of the time by its violence. Let's celebrate the freedom fighters, Greeks who perished in scenes of terrible cruelty for independence, freedom, and the advent of modern Greece. And beyond, the Greek War of Independence gave rise to the first truly popular surge of international solidarity in history, where everyone could contribute. France is proud of its role to support Greece's freedom. In addition to the many Philhellenic volunteers who came to take part in the War of Independence, France was one of the three powers which, on October the 20th, 1827, made the War of Independence possible by destroying the Ottoman fleet in the Bay of Navarin. Following this memorable battle, France helped the Greek authorities to pacify the Peloponnese and to integrate it into the young state. In the space of 5 years, this expedition of Morea led to the death of 1,500 French soldiers. So let's remember these soldiers who died far from their home for a certain idea of freedom. The military cemeteries of Athens, Thessaloniki, and Corfu remind us that 500,000 Frenchmen fought on Greek soil for 3 long years. With this bicentenary, let's remember that our friendship with Greece came about through arms, but also through letters, the arts, popular enthusiasm for a just cause, the feeling that being European meant being devoted to freedom, that being European meant defending a civilization and a certain idea of it. It was a war of ideas too, won thanks to the theater, to music, by the pen of poets, the generosity of anonymous people from one end of the European continent to the other, and particularly in France. The Greek revolutionaries had read the philosophers of the Enlightenment. Some of them had fought in the wars of the French Revolution and Napoleon, and in return, in 1821, an international, intellectual, and humanitarian movement, a movement of volunteers, arose throughout Europe to liberate Greece. So let us draw inspiration from the ideals of 1821, from the popular energy, from the intellectual impetus and solidarity. On a continent that has paid a high price for it, freedom is not inherited, it is conquered. As President Macron said last March, our love for Greece continues today with the enthusiasm of the first Philhellenes. We love her and her values and still carry them, all of us, together. We carry them when moments of tension reappear, when anguish arises, and we will continue to carry them. It lays at the foundation of the European project and the Franco-Greek friendship. Thank you for your attention.
I would like to introduce now Dr. Peter Abbott, the British Consul General in New England, and whom I would like to thank for coming here. Dr. Abbott has a PhD in Greek tragedy. I believe he will speak in ancient Greek. With our NATO ally, the United Kingdom, we share a common past of friendship and alliances in all crucial moments of our modern history. In the revolution's most difficult moment, Lord Byron's sacrifice was a source of inspiration. Consul General, welcome here.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Stratos, for that very kind introduction. I will not speak in ancient Greek, you will be glad to hear, but in modern English. Ambassador Yana Angelopoulou Daskalaki, Professor Cammett, Professor Roilos, Harvard University and the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs, fellow Consuls General, it's a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. When Stratos and I were last asked to speak together, it was on the subject of the Elgin marbles. I'm rather pleased to say, firstly, that we didn't end up speaking about that subject, and secondly, that I'm going to be speaking about something far less controversial this evening. I'm very grateful to Stratos for his invitation to speak here this afternoon, partly as a Philhellenist myself. Stratos has already mentioned that as a postgraduate student at the University of Cambridge in England many moons ago, I wrote my PhD thesis on the tragedies of Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Euripides. And like the British poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, I believe that we are all Greeks and that our culture owes a tremendous debt to those extraordinary writers in particular. But this afternoon I want to talk about Britain's role in the Greek War of Independence and the abiding ties that still exist and continue to bind our two countries. In 1827, when the young Greek Revolution looked all but lost, French, Russian, and British ships sailed into the Ionian Sea. The Battle of Navarino, which Arnaud has already mentioned, in which the Ottoman navy was decisively defeated, was the last major naval battle in history to be fought entirely with sailing ships. But the Greek War of Independence was also remarkable for featuring the first use of a mechanized warship. The Carteria, Greek for Perseverance, was a British-built steamship, commissioned and built in London, and played a decisive role in the Hellenic Navy's operations against the Ottoman Empire. But Britain's contribution to the Greek War of Independence was not just naval. In 1824 and 1825, the London Philhellenic Committee worked with the City of London to raise loans totaling around £1.5 million, the equivalent of around $420 million in today's money, to support the Greek cause. So it's no exaggeration to say that the City of London was the financier of the Greek Revolution. Perhaps the most famous member of the London Philhellenic Committee was George Gordon Byron, or simply Lord Byron, undoubtedly the greatest British Philhellenist to ever have lived. It was in Byron's long narrative poem of 1812, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, that Byron first gave his extraordinary poetic voice to the cause of Greek self-determination. He sold his family home, Rochdale Manor in England, to raise money for the cause, and famously, he travelled to Greece himself and took up arms against the Ottoman Empire. Byron died, aged 36, in Greece, from a fever contracted after the first and second sieges of the town of Missolonghi, and some say his heart is buried there still. In Greece, he is revered as no other foreigner, and, frankly, as very few Greeks are. And like a Homeric hero, he is accorded an honorific epithet, megalos kai kalos, a great and good man. The Greek form of Byron continues in popularity as a masculine name in Greece today, and a suburb of Athens is called Varonas in his honour. A marble slab given by the King of Greece is laid directly above Byron's grave in the family church of St Mary Magdalene in the village of Hucknall Torkard in Nottinghamshire in England. Incidentally, Stratos, Byron was fiercely opposed to what he saw as Lord Elgin's robbery of the Parthenon marbles, so even more of a hero, I think, for Greece. And finally, of course, on the political side, it was the London Protocol of 1830 that established Greece as an independent sovereign state. And it was at the London Conference of 1832, chaired by British Foreign Secretary Lord Palmerston, that the Kingdom of Greece was established, bringing stability to the country. Earlier this year, speaking in Athens, the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, described Greece as the land of his grandfather and of his father's birth. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, who died in April of this year, was born on the island of Corfu in 1921, 100 years ago, and 100 years after Greek independence. At his birth, Prince Philip was a prince of both Denmark and Greece, and Greek blood flows through the veins of the royal family in Britain to this day. So it is hard to find more abiding ties, I think, than these between two nations. These days, it can be tempting to think that Britain and Europe have forever been arguing. It is a great pleasure, therefore, to be invited here today to set out the case of where Britain, 200 years ago, came to the aid of a European friend and ally and supported it in its quest for independence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now I'd like to introduce Ambassador João Pedro de Vasconcelos Fins de Lago, the Consul General of Portugal in Boston. Portugal is currently is holding the local presidency of the EU countries in Boston. In 2021, we also celebrate the 40-year anniversary since Greece's accession to the European Union in 1981. So I felt that it was very appropriate for Portugal as the local presidency and as a country with which we share a common a common past of transition from an authoritarian regime to a blossoming democracy, and also a future inside the European Union to come and be also representing this occasion. Welcome, Ambassador João.
My dear friend Stratos, Consul General of Greece, and Ambassador Angelopoulos Daskali, Professor Cammett, Professor Roilos, dear colleagues, Consul Generals, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me first of all, on behalf of the European Union and on my own national capacity, to thank this very kind invitation. And I promise I will be brief, as we are getting very close to our keynote speaker tonight. Much has been said about the crucial events that unfold 200 years ago. I am not an authority on that matter. I will leave that for those who are experts. But with your indulgence, for a split second, I would like to look beyond, in past times, beyond what happened 200 years ago, which in part explains how important it was, not only for the Greeks, but for Western civilization and indeed the world at large, what happened 200 years ago. Greece, ladies and gentlemen, is the very cradle of Western civilization. And that cradle was restored 200 years ago. We owe, all of those sitting here today, we owe to Greece much of our own cultural fingerprint, from politics to many other levels, but beginning with that one. We owe to Greece the invention itself of democracy, not only as an idea, but as a political model, a model that, despite all troubles, strives today, and it is indeed our pathway to the future. The government of the people, by the people, for the people, a motto well known here in this country, the United States of America, was no doubt inaugurated by the Demos Krate, by the government of the people, and we owe that to Greece beyond those 200 years ago. That allowed for the modern world to care for values as important as the rule of majority, respecting the will of the people while protecting the minorities, respecting inclusion and diversity. Values such as the independent contribution that media, and indeed social media also, can do to our lives, a fair, free, impartial, and independent media. We can trace these values back to the very concept of the Greek democracy. The independence of the judiciary, sometimes questioned, and a cornerstone of the political buildings our countries live in. The rule of law, but most of all, the individual as center of the world. The curious individual who, was able to create the most extraordinary literature. My dear colleague, the British Consul General, has reference to it. But philosophy, arts, sports, it's a long list in the case of sports, Olympics aside. I open a personal and national caveat for the football Euro of 2004 that still hurts for the Portuguese. But that has allowed also for modern Greece, the Greece we have today, a Greece committed to international relations, that values multilateralism, a founding member of the United Nations Organization, a member of NATO, and crucially, a member of the European Union since 1981, preceding Portugal and Spain entering the EU. So in that, Greece also shed light to Portugal. So, ladies and gentlemen, we commemorate here a double anniversary indeed. The 200 years, the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution, but also modern Greece and its 40th anniversary as member of the European Union. Madam Ambassador, I promised I was going to be short. Thank you very much to Greece, to all Greeks in homeland and diaspora. Evcharisto. Thank you.
Thank you, João. The gospel says the first will be the last and the last will be the first. And I would like to introduce my colleague, the Consul General of Haiti. In a highly symbolic move, Haiti, the first nation of slaves which became free through a revolution, was the first country to recognize Greece. Replying to Adamantios Korais' letter, Haiti's president, Jean-Pierre Boyer, was the first to recognize Greece and display Haiti's recognition and solidarity to Greece. Haiti did not have money at the time, but they sent to Greeks a massive shipment of coffee, which they sold to buy humanitarian aid. That was a highly symbolic but also substantial move. We thank you very much, and I would like to thank you, Consul General, for coming here to honor our commemoration. Thank you.
Thank you, Consul General. Honorable Ambassador Gianna Angelopoulos Daraskaki, Honorable Stratos Efthymiou, Consul General of Greece in Boston, Honorable Arnaud Mentré, Consul General of France in Boston, Honorable Peter Abbott, British Consul General in Boston, Honorable João, Pedro de Vasconcelos, Fins do Lago, Consul General of Portugal in Boston, Professor Cammett, Professor Roilos, honorable diplomats, consular members, ladies and gentlemen, students. Today is a great day for Greece because it reminds all the efforts made by the ancestors to give the Greek people their independence. My presence here as a representative of Haiti is a mark of recognition of the support of my ancestors for this war. I'm very proud of what they have done for other countries who fought here and there for a better future for their citizens. Any war carries with it suffering, hatred, differences, but the results are more than satisfactory when it comes to freeing an oppressed people. This war allowed the Greeks to liberate their country and take a new direction for the well-being of their children, but they did not forget those who accompanied them during this long journey. It is this ability of the Greek people to recognize the support of others that is worth my presence here in behalf of the Haitian people. Thank you. The gesture of President Jean-Pierre Boyer on January 50, 1822, recognizing the independence of Greece from the Ottoman Empire, as well as the symbolic donation of 20,000 bags of coffee to help financing the Greek liberating forces, is known and recognized by all the Greek citizens as a great support. I can say, unlike other countries which do their best to hide the head of the former Haiti in their struggle for the liberation or in their search for a better tomorrow for their citizens. By example, in 1930, Santo Domingo was destroyed by a cyclone, and the Haitian government at the time greatly participated in the reconstruction of the neighborhood capital. Yet it is not these slices of history that are told to our Dominican friends, but rather hatred and discrimination. In doing so, the results, instead of uniting the island, the two people, divide them. See what is happening now in Dominican Republic. It's happening to my brothers Haitian in this country. Haiti is in a very bad situation today, but the country was not born that way. And it was not always like it is like now either. Thank you to the people and the government of Greece for showing so much gratitude to my country. May Haiti back again the country, the guarantor of individual freedom and human rights in the world. This is what we were. And this is why we help a lot of countries. Today we are struggling and we are alone. May Greece continue to shine. Happy commemoration of the War of Independence. Thank you.
I would like to express my gratitude to the Consuls General for the wonderful and very inspiring comments, and to you once more, Stratos. The Greek War of Independence, its preparation and its outcome, the establishment of the independent Greek polity, were the products of the convergence of several factors, including most notably, first, the Enlightenment and the political development triggered off by the American and the French revolutions. Second, the movement of Philhellenism. And third, of course, the patriotism of its fighters and supporters. The role of cultural politics in the success of the Greek Revolution, especially in the development and dissemination of Philhellenism, was by no means less important than that of the geopolitical dynamics of the time. Today, I want to address briefly Harvard's significant contribution to international Philhellenism. I would thus like to transfer you back first to 1828, 7 years after the outbreak of the Greek Revolution. In January 1828, Ioannis Kapodistrias, who had been elected as the governor of Greece almost 1 year earlier in 1827, arrived in Nafplion in the Peloponnese. The same year, in 1828, a fighter and officer and scholar, Alexandros Negris, began teaching modern Greek here at Harvard, who happened Negris, who happened to be also the nephew of two of the most important leaders of the Greek Revolution, Demetrios and Alexandros Ypsilantis, had arrived in Boston in late 1827. In 1828, he also published his Grammar of the Modern Greek Language here in Boston. That publication should be viewed, I argue, as an example of an early, inchoate cultural political program that aimed at familiarizing American scholars and general readership as well with the culture and language of the inhabitants of the newly established Greek state, of the politically resuscitated descendants of the glorious ancient Greeks, at least as Greeks of the time were constructed in the imaginary of the Greek literati and of the Philhellenes. Also in 1828, a major scholar in the field of Greek linguistics arrived here in Boston, Evangelinos Apostolidis Sophocles. After spending several years at Yale, Sophocles left Yale and returned to Boston and began his teaching here at Harvard in 1842. Negris and Sophocles would not have thrived here at Harvard if this leading American educational institution had not become a most hospitable place for all things Greek, due mainly to the Philhellenism of Edward Everett. Harvard produced another fervent Philhellene, Samuel Gridley Howe, about whom Stratos, Efthymiou, said a few words. After graduating from Harvard Medical School in 1824, Howe went to Greece, where he offered his services as a doctor at the Greek army. After 3 years, he returned to the States and raised a great amount of money for the support of the fighting Greeks. In 1828, he published his historical sketch of the Greek Revolution. He remained an enthusiastic friend of Greece until the end of his life in 1876. But this afternoon, in the following 2 or 3 minutes, I want to focus on Edward Everett's advocacy of his contemporary Greek struggle for national liberation, political emancipation, and cultural development. Of course, this is not the occasion for exploring the complex, at times even contradictory ideological and political principles that had shaped aspects of his Philhellenism. This might be the subject of another lecture on a different occasion. Born in Dorchester, Massachusetts in 1794, Everett was admitted to Harvard College when he was only 13 years old, and was destined to become the university's 16th president between 1846 and 1848. The precocious scholar, who graduated as the valedictorian of his class, developed a deep interest in contemporary Greece, its culture and language very early. Already in 1813, he published an extremely interesting article in the General Repository and Review. His approach to Greek culture and history had been influenced by their idealization by major representatives of Romanticism and of the Enlightenment, most notably by Lord Byron and Adamantios Korais, the leading figure of the Greek Enlightenment. From the very beginning of his discussion, Everett singled out Greek and Hebrew as the only 2 ancient languages that, as he stressed, remained alive until modern times. Quote, the difference, this is Everett's words, the difference between ancient and modern Greek is not perhaps much greater than between the Attic and the Doric dialects of the former, end of quote. Everett devoted a considerable and the most engaging part of this discussion to what I would call his cultural political approach to the Greek cause. Cultural renaissance in Greece could happen only if the Greeks became independent. Cultural progress and freedom go hand in hand, he professed, in a manner recalling, of course, most notably Adamantios Korais' views. This approach to Greek cultural tradition and contemporary politics was shared by the majority of the Greek literati of the time and the Philhellenes alike, in whose imaginary Greece, its present and its glorious past, had been shaped under the influence, as I said before, of the Enlightenment and of Romanticism. In his attempt to convince his readers that contemporary Greeks are indeed worthy of their glorious heritage and capable of achieving their cultural resuscitation, Everett praised the educational initiatives of Greek scholars and the literary production of Greek writers, especially those living in the diaspora. He singled out Korais as the most significant and influential Greek scholar of the time. Everett stressed in that article, quote, "These short notices of the Greek literati may convince us that there is something in motion for the improvement of their nation, and gives us ground to hope that if a conjuncture of foreign affairs should favor their restoration, they will not at least be wanting to themselves. In their current situation, Greeks, Everett argued, are forbidden to speak, and if possible to think, on all those things of moral and political interest, which engage so much attention in other countries." End of quote. 10 years after that article, that is in 1823, Everett published another important piece in North American Review, prompted by the recent edition of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics by Adamantios Korais. In that second article, which appeared 2 years before Everett was elected a member of the House of Representatives, one deserves a noteworthy shift of his perspective on the Greek cause toward more pragmatic considerations. This time, Everett's emphasis was placed not so much on the desire of the Greek people to revive their ancestral cultural glory, as rather on their exemplification of what he viewed as a paradigmatic struggle between two entirely different religious and cultural worlds. No doubt, this polarization had shaped the imaginary of most Greek fighters and the Philhellenes. By employing such arguments, Everett aimed at appealing to the republicanist values of his fellow Americans. It is not fortuitous that his advocacy of the Greek cause had a great impact on the congressman Daniel Webster. Inspired by Everett, Webster delivered a memorable speech at the American Congress supporting the Greek Revolution. A speech, however, that did not manage to convince President Monroe that his country should recognize the Greek independence, by contrast most notably to Haiti, which had won its own independence thanks to the heroism of its people a few years earlier, in 1804. Everett portrayed the uprising of the Greeks against the Turks as an exemplification of the American ideals of liberty and civil and political rights. Ideals, it should be recalled, which unfortunately he himself was not eager to support with regard to major domestic issues of his country, such as slavery. In that article, Everett urged America to recognize the independence of Greece as it did for the South American independence. Addressing his fellow American readers, Everett highlighted the impact of their own revolution on the Greek one. Commenting on the letter signed on the 25th of March, 1821, the legendary date of the outbreak of the Greek Revolution, that he had received from the Messenian Senate of Kalamata in the Peloponnese, which he translated, in fact, into English, Everett emphasized, quote, "Such an appeal of the anxious conclave of self-devoted patriots in the inaccessible cliffs of the Peloponnese must bring home to the mind of the least reflecting Americans the great and glorious part which this country is to act in the political regeneration of the world. Through France, the influence of our example has been transmitted to the other European states. From the venerated plains of Greece and from the scarcely explored range of the Cordilleras, a voice of salutation and a cry for sympathy are resounding to our ears. If President Monroe's ears remained deaf to such pleas, Everett's initiatives succeeded in mobilizing the Philhellenic feelings of many other fellow Americans of his, including notable Harvardians like Samuel Gridley Howe. This is what I had to say briefly about Harvard and Philhellenism. I'm very pleased to introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon, Mrs. Gianna Angelopoulou Daskalaki, President of the Committee Greece 2021. I should mention that I have had several opportunities, also as a member of that committee, to witness Mrs. Angelopoulos Daskalaki's extraordinary vision and enthusiastic devotion to it. In the last 2 years, in her capacity as President of the Greece 2021 Committee, she traveled all over Greece to hear and discuss the needs and priorities of local communities. What she has done is amazing. She is an admirable and indefatigable miracle worker indeed. In addition to this superhuman faculty, Gianna Angelopoulou Daskalaki's many other capacities include the following. She is lawyer, businesswoman, philanthropist, and ambassador at large of the Greek state. She has been a member of the Hellenic Parliament and the president of the Athens 2004 Olympic Games Organizing Committee. Since July 31st, 2019, as I mentioned before, she is the president of the Greece 2021 Committee, the state institution established for the celebration of the bicentennial of the Greek Revolution of 1821. Gianna Angelopoulou Daskalaki studied law at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and practiced law for several years. In 1986, she started her public career initially as a member of the Municipal Council in the municipality of Athens and later as a member of the Hellenic Parliament. She was elected a member of the Parliament in 1989 and in 1990. After her marriage to businessman Theodoros Angelopoulos, a great philanthropist, she resigned from her seat in Parliament and devoted herself to her family, the family business, and social engagement. After securing the bid to host the 2004 Olympic Games, a great Greek victory, she was invited to organize the Athens 2004 Olympic and Paralympic Games. After their successful conclusion, she described her experience in her book My Greek Drama, which was published in May 2013 and was listed among the top 10 best-selling books in the New York Times and in the Wall Street Journal. Mrs. Angelopoulos is also a great supporter of educational initiatives and has an active philanthropic presence in projects in Greece and worldwide. She has served as Vice President of the Dean's Council of Harvard's Kennedy School of Governance since 1994. Other initiatives of hers are the Angelopoulos Global Public Leaders Program here at the Kennedy School, the Interdisciplinary Angelopoulos Professorship in Public Health and International Development at Harvard, the Angelopoulos Foundation Yearly Scholarship Program at the Clinton Global Initiative University, and the Gianna Angelopoulos Program for Science, Technology, and Innovation at the University of Cambridge. She has been appointed Commander of the Order of Honor by the Hellenic Republic, Chevalier of the French Republic's National Order of the Legion of Honor by the French Republic, and she is also the recipient of the Gold Distinction by the International Olympic Committee. She is an ambassador at large of the Hellenic Republic, and she has been awarded an honorary degree, an honorary PhD, from the Department of Physical Education and Sport Science of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in 1999, and the gold medal of the Hellenic Open University very recently, last summer. Ambassador.
Self-service. Indeed, it is an honor. I thought I will feel great, but I must say that I continue to get educated, as Greek said so many years ago, every moment of my life. So I should start by thanking Melani, Professor Cammett, and of course the Weatherhead Center for the hospitality, the invitation and the hospitality. Of course, my dear friend, Professor Panagiotis Roilos, and Stratos Efthymiou. We knew about him a lot. We learned about him a little bit more today. His vast experience and topics he's interested to, actually the languages I was not aware of. And of course, last but not least, what you offered us, dear consuls and esteemed members of the Consul Society. It was beyond expectation. Actually, I was trying to, like the professors, to mark and evaluate each of you, but each of you had something unique to say. And I have to say that I'm proud and humble in the same time, saying that this is what Greece offers to the world. Small tiles that they create the mosaic that we belong all in. So I thank you so much. So, Greece is such a small country, almost elusive. Who said that? I allude to the words of our great poet, Odysseus Elitis, because words are the pickaxes that dig deep into the veins of our memory. And the language they form lay the foundation of Hellenism. Words, alongside weapons, convinced first the European and later the Americans that this tiny nation, which revolted against the mighty Ottoman Empire, would not give up. And freedom or death was not just a motto. It was the love for the motherland, as per the words of Rigas Fereos or Rigas Velestinlis. When it became obvious to the powerful courts of Europe that after a 2-year war and the destruction of Dramalis, the Turkish general army at Dervenakia, the anticipated annihilation of the Greeks did not occur, it was time for diplomats to take over. So we have on the one side Theodoros Kolokotronis, the general, with his strategic astuteness and the power of the weapons. He stands at the one side. On the other side stood Alexandros Mavrokordatos, the political genius, with the power of his arguments, the warrior and the intellectual, not always in unison, part of our history, this one, but always faithful to the common cause. The one supplied decisive victories, endurance to the revolution. The other one addressed the institutional aspects of the state, a state that at the time existed only in our hearts, in the hearts of Greeks, and reorganized the international alliances of the struggling nation. These two components were decisive in persuading Europe first that the Greek issue had to be resolved politically. By that time, it was not exclusively a Greek issue, but one of an international dimensions. Making the Greek Revolution widely known, though, was also assured by particularly active Philhellenes. The Philhellenic movement, I remind everybody, there is no other word in other language. We're proud to say that it's only for us Greeks. Actually, this movement was developed in Europe first, America after, and other countries. It was probably the first time in world history that so many people from so many countries voluntarily fought with the Greeks or supported or raised the cause or raised money with no expectation, no personal gain. In the US, as we are today, the Greek Revolution inspired the intellectual, the economic elite. And after all, it was only 45 years after the Declaration of Independence and the self-evident truths of equality, right to be free, right to life, and the pursuit of happiness. The Greek appeals for freedom and national independence moved the American people. Philhellenes such as George Jarvis, Edward Everett, as Panagiotis pointed out, and where in his tomb I paid the respect with a wreath yesterday, James Williams, Daniel Webster, George Wilson, Samuel Greed Howe, again, I paid my respect yesterday, and many others, Jonathan Peckham Miller, who traveled to Greece, they fought on the side of the Greeks. They wrote about the revolution. They raised money for the struggle. And Miller adopted an orphan child. And this orphan child, Lukas Miltiadis Miller, became the first Greek elected to Congress. So, zealous Philhellenic committees were established here in Boston, the Athens of America, also in New York, in Washington. In the aftermath of the naval battle of Navarino, the successful outcome of the revolution was ensured, of course, thanks to the big armies, the big countries, as we call them, but conditions of extreme poverty ravaged many parts of the country. And why the Greek population survived? It survived sent to money sent from other countries. And United Kingdom, but especially United States of America. And allow me to say, it was the most significant humanitarian aid of the time. Additionally, the United States were the first influential country to recognize the struggle of the Greeks. So let's start with President James Monroe, who adopted a clear Philhellenic position in his famous speech to Congress, December 1823. He did not officially recognize the Greek independence, but his stand had a crucial diplomatic impact. You can imagine that. His successor, John Quincy Adams, was more cautious in the diplomatic field, yet the vast humanitarian aid reached Greece during his tenure. And I recall a letter that the first governor of Greece, Ioannis Kapodistrias, sent where publicly thanked the American government, even though the help came exclusively through private donors. This contribution was not forgotten, as you've seen that the Hellenic Post issued a series of fine 9 stamps, where among them there is Samuel Howe, the Bostonian doctor. So, back in 1821, the Greeks started from zero. Within 9 years, they created a state. Greeks and the rest of Europe mark the transition from multinational authoritarian empires to the establishment of self-determined nation states. Okay, what happened after? 200 years of navigation. During these 200 years of navigation, I have to accept that Greece used the shadows of the heroes to disguise wrong decisions, pitfalls, mistakes, setbacks, deceptions, and disasters, and also to overemphasize victories and triumphs. In contemporary times, though, Greece preserves the privilege to continue its journey with greater self-awareness, guided by the efforts and achievements of distinguished members of the Greek diaspora. Among them, it's a long list of Americans of Greek origin who have excelled and who have and do advocate Greece in politics, in science, in art, in sports, in business. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's come to what we have achieved, the committee, so far. We visited the entire country. Restrictions or no restrictions, we went to around 80 places. Why is that? We wanted to witness the willingness to reflect on the course we have traveled in all these 200 years, not only the revolution. And you know, there is a testimony that it's not a narrow group of intellectuals or historians who they are willing to contribute, but also our entire society. The public opinion addressed the anniversary with maturity, with wisdom. And in this process, issues that they were concealed in the dungeons of history, they were addressed. I have to remind you something you don't know probably, but one of the numerous actions that they took place, it was one theatrical performance, and it was this October in Herodion Theatre, where the Association of Greek Criminologists enacted in a packed Odeon the trial of Kolokotronis, the general, who was unjustly accused of high treason. And he was absolved thanks to the integrity of 2 of the 5 judges. So it was a green page of our history. But what we've seen is the society is ready to dig deep even into wounds. So, from the beginning of the revolution till today, Greece has a kind of very impactful journey. And this journey showed many things: endurance in suffering, solidarity, collaboration, a need for domestic ability, seeking solid alliance with other countries. These timeless values sound self-evident. However, they were proven very fragile during the 10-year crisis that happened some years ago, and to a lesser extent during the pandemic. We live in a time of overwhelming changes. Extreme, irrational powers, authoritarian regimes, and the malicious use of technology threaten democracy. Threaten democracy, this is a truth we all have to accept. Not to mention the security and even existential threats that many nations, most of them, they face because of the climate change and the environmental degradation. So the citizens' role has to be redefined. This heritage that we have, we are happy, we are very fortunate to have, is being in a way communicated through Greeks all over the world. Remember last March, the 25th of March, our national anniversary, when we see numerous cities, bridges, monuments, buildings all around the world, especially in the United States, to be in blue and white colors. This is you, the Greeks, that they did that. And you reminded the world that we celebrate a very important event after 200 years of our revolution. So, despite of the boundaries, the adversities of the pandemic, you know how many actions we had, projects? 340 within Greece and in another 31 countries. Countries where we have embassies, consuls, but also active Greeks. 200 of them, they are expected to complete the days that we are, and the rest are going to go on. And I don't speak about authorities only. I speak about associations, institutions, schools, universities, municipalities, regions, museums, who participated in them. And don't be surprised, you know that the majority of these projects, they have a development direction, because Greek society chose to celebrate, to honor, to reflect, to reconsider, but also to focus its forces into the future course, another how many 100 years. So, all these projects, they were diverse. They addressed remembrance and history, the revival or revitalization of traditional arts, chirotechnia. That's why I was dressed in traditional clothes all the time, because we found out that something between 50,000 and 100,000 people, they live from this kind of profession and arts. Highlighting historical monuments, landmarks, even natural paths, hiking routes, even local products. Promoting proposals and address the development of the tourism industry. Education, improvement of everyday life, and on. Numerous student competitions in primary schools, in high schools, in universities. They were conducted throughout the country. And they had different subjects, from history and art to entrepreneurship and to technology and to robotics. So, the Greece 2021 Committee assumed the coordination of all these projects, that they came, I repeat, as proposals from the society. It was not a plan created by the elite only. It came from people, real people. So that was a break of tradition. People should expect us to organize celebrations, to dance, to sing. That was not possible. Even if we had planned major projects, among them 200 young Greeks to follow the roots of our friends' nation in France, in Portugal, in Britain, even to come to Haiti, in Russia, wherever, was cancelled because of the pandemic. But again, it was a bold move from us to break from the tradition, and judging by the result, it was a successful journey. So, another important fact that you have to be all aware is that the committee, even if it is the official committee, received zero state funds. We decided, after a 10-year crisis, to measure our abilities. So we raised donations, we collected sponsorships, we created a very successful numismatic program with silver coins that they depicted the expansion of Greece, starting from Peloponnese and Rumeli, going up Thessalia, going up Macedonia. The last heading, it was the Aegean Islands, just 100 years ago. And also our two coins that they depicted, the first coin of Greece, Phoenix, and the drachma, just to remind people what we've been through, and also 4 golden coins showing the evolution of the Greek flag. And all this, they secured impressive funds, and this is how we financed many of the projects. But not also that. We wanted to show that we are a committee who lives in the real world. So during the pandemic, we created, let's say, like a small hospital, 18 ICU units that we added to the hospital Papanikolaou in Thessaloniki. We funded the research of the Greek drug from Greek doctors, again in Thessaloniki, against the COVID. We devoted whatever money came from the numismatic program after August, during the deadly fires, to devote it and create something so we can heal some of the wounds that they happened because of these deadly fires. And furthermore, we created alliances. We recommended to the Greek Ministry of Internal Affairs, to the government actually, after we received 250 suggestions about projects in all cities around the country, to finance them. Why? Because they all have a kind of development issue inside them. So there were projects that they should not start today and die tomorrow. There are projects that they will be there for the years to come. So the government accepted, and they put aside a sum of 50 million euros to finance, and some of them they have already started. Or the Ministry of Culture took 18 million euros from the RRF. I remind you, RRF is the European Union Recovery and Resilience Plan, the RRF, to support the Greek handicrafts industry, because there are many people, thousands of people, that they can survive because of that. And also, in October, we organized, after 10 months of work, the Forum Greece in 2040. Why that? We asked all the social alliances, all people that they represent us in Greece, to think about challenges and opportunities towards the year 2040. Simply, as the Prime Minister Mitsotakis put it when we were ready to show that to the public, that happened the 18th of last October in the House of Parliament. Imagine the children who will be born today, tomorrow, this year, 2021. In 2040, they will have their future ahead of us. They have to choose if they will study, if not, what kind of knowledge they have, what route, what kind of route they will follow, how important it is for the first time in Greece. All people that represent us from banks, agriculture, universities, syndicates, to think about all these people, how they will, what is the forecast? As a Weatherhead Center, you understand that. The forecast of tomorrow. So this form came as a stick for a personal computer, and it is available now to the society, of course the government, the opposition, but we have a very good relation with all political parties, and this is part of our contribution into the future. And I have to say that we had also VIP speakers, and the first one, it was Senator Bob Menendez of the United States, who under the Acropolis addressed the audience having to do with the geopolitical changes, needs, challenges, and so on. Among them, it was also Patriarch Bartholomew. It was Andrew Liveris, as you know, the Greek-Australian businessman of Dow Chemical, Albert Bourla from Pfizer, who actually we received both the gold medals in the Open University. It was also Michelle from School of Public Health, who addressed as well the forum, and it was, last but not least, the Royal Astronomer, Martin Rees from the United Kingdom. So the commitment has also, and you will see that this is the list of actions being taken. We were thinking about our era of artificial intelligence, and this era in a way forced us, and because we had some ideas from members of the plenary session, to create the first Institute of Artificial Intelligence, Data Science, and Algorithms. And I have today, probably it's my lucky day today, that today, just today, we received the go-on from the government because we secured also the money from the European Union. And this, I believe it's so important for young Greeks to get educated, to get trained in Greece from the gurus of artificial intelligence, but also Greeks that they are everywhere, that they can come, teach, work, stay back, brain gain after the brain drain, who knows? But we are very optimistic about that. As you understood, our vision in the committee is to cement, in a way, this new mentality that we've seen that has been shaped during this anniversary year. To assure the completion of developmental projects that go beyond the deadline of December 31st in 2021, preserve this intangible legacy of the anniversary. Also, to recall ingenuity, adaptability, endurance, these qualities that historically they are linked to us, the Greeks, to realize and accept the need, the emergent need to create collaborations, synergies, alliance with people, with countries, forward the common goal of development and prosperity, to highlight the potential of our talented youth. This is the real capital. This is the real fortune that we have. And also to demonstrate how to describe it, a new love for our country, a new sense of belonging to the future, so that we can help all of us in unity, the Greeks, our friends, and our allies. Thank you so much.